the video.
And then we can position the camera however you might need it.
Okay, where is that?
Oh, so right here.
Oh, right here, okay.
Should. There we go.
Okay, I think that should be presenter.
You'll want it a little bit closer because they'll see the shared screen. So they'll have everything that's on the projector.
Oh, okay. That's a good point.
We can set these as presets as well.
Should be fine.
Okay. Let's make that number 1. There you go. So now if you want to set a wider or closer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
And to set those, if you just select that after you get it where
Yeah.
you want it, then you just select the set preset and then you can overwrite any of these.
Okay. So is this? Never seen it with 2 screens before.
Yes, so anytime you have the second monitor, it gives you a second Zoom window and which just shows you the like, so if you're sharing your content
Yeah.
and you have a PowerPoint presentation with presenters notes, those will appear on this one.
Okay.
And then your Zoom, like Brady Bunch kind of view will
Yeah,
show
it'll
up on
be
the other
this
one.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that way you can kind of see both as you're.
I need to figure out how to set that up with mine.
The faculty love it.
Yeah,
That was their request.
yeah, no, that would be helpful, just. Cause I give Zoom presentations. I guess, yeah, whatever the presenters, do I just leave the recording?
I would pause it if it's gonna be a good amount.
Soon, I know you. Just for this particular section, just interested for folks who have had some community engaged training and research and folks who are responsible for training others, kind of show of hands if you've had some training in community engaged research. Okay, folks that are kind of in charge of training others. Yeah, okay, good. Just trying to see who in the room, because what we want to be able to do is kind of share some experiences and best practices. So I'm going to share some from my perspective, but would love to hear from other folks who can kind of benefit from all the expertise in the room. Does that okay? I won't ask too many questions from folks now that everybody's going to be ready. All right. So we're all good to go. We're good. We only have okay, so I can just stay behind here. Okay, we have one person on Zoom too. So welcome to a person on Zoom as well. So I'm Stephanie Miller-Hughes. Stephanie, don't let the A throw you. It's Stephanie Miller-Hughes. I'm at Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. I think in the introductions they mentioned, I also work with the Vanderbilt CTSI as well. And I'll share a little bit more about my work in community engagement as we move forward. So I was thinking about this. So I guess there's no need to talk about like why we need to do this, but I did have a conversation with someone before we started about community engaged research training. So most of us, everybody in here is a researcher, is that right? No? Probably what I'm sorry.
I'm a data concierge, so my job is to connect research to resources.
To the services, okay.
Research.
All right. Great. And so one of the things that we think about is that most of the researchers, there was no formal training in community engaged research, right? And so for folks that have been doing it for years, it's kind of one of those things, you know, maybe you have connections with the community, you know people, and everybody, there are people that are doing really, really good community engaged research, and they haven't had no formal training. But over the past few years, a lot, especially with a lot of the CTSIs, like there's been kind of some emphasis on making sure that we kind of level set folks around community engagement. Can you hear me in the very back? No, I can see the leaning, and I'm trying to stay behind the podium. Let me see if I can speak a little bit louder. Okay, so here's what we want to talk about today. I just want to share some experiences with community engaged research training and some best practices. Again, that's from all of us, but what I'll start with is sharing some of the work that I do locally back in Nashville as part of two different community engaged research cores. Is that better? Is there no mic? If I didn't have to stay behind here, I think I
I can zoom out, so it can be a wider screen for the video. So if you wanna get, although you wanna look
I
at
need
your
to
notes,
quit,
yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna come around here and then. So I'll start with the first core that's a part of the Vanderbilt CTSA. So that was established in 2007. On that core, I serve as a consulting director and researcher in community training and co-leader. And so for that core, we have some other components too. We have a dissemination team, a team that works on stakeholder integration, but I'll just talk about kind of the work we're doing around training for now. So we have kind of these three researcher training programs or tracks that we have there. You see those listed here. So the first one I'd like to talk about is our Community Scholars Program. And so this is a year-long program that we have, and it supports trainees in establishing partnerships with community-based organizations. So these are typically graduate students or professional students at Meharry or Vanderbilt. They submit a formal application. That application they have to have a community-based organization that they're already partnering with to submit that application. Some letters, they have a research proposal, and this has to be focused on the work that's important for that community-based organization, right? The scholar gets some funding, the community partner also gets a stipend for participating. And so we've had about 9 cohorts today of these folks. And so we were talking earlier about the need to kind of get this training along the pipeline. So these are folks, a lot of these folks are PhD students, medical students, or dental students who are part of this. And so it's a year-long program. And we had about 9 cohorts today. And so just to give you an example of some of the projects, I won't read these here, but you can see some of the types of projects we've had, some work around with Black doulas. At the very end, the width is the community-based organization. So you can see this is Homeland Heart, it's a virgin wellness, workers' dignity, business with fraternity. Our most recent folks are with this health and education network, and some folks working with community gardens. So these are just some examples of some of the projects and some of the things that, you know, we want when as part of all this training I share, the goal is that folks will go out and continue to do this work. So some of our scholars have gone on to be, some of them have stayed on and they're on our advisory council. They're continuing to doing work with their community organizations. Some of them have gotten jobs with these community-based organizations. So they have kind of gone on to kind of do more with those organizations. So we also have a postdoctoral training program. And this is really so folks who have their PhD. It's really interesting because it's not like the traditional PhD, you know, or postdoc in a lab, right? So most of us who are doing community engaged research, we don't have physical labs. We're out doing work in the community. And so this is 2 or 3 years long. So we kind of provided the areas for folks to get training in community engaged research. And so they complete a Meharry employment application. So for both of the programs are shared for both cores, the postdocs, they have to have an academic home. So they're fill out a Meharry employment application. They have a formal mentoring team. Their mentor can be at Meharry or Vanderbilt. They work with other faculty doing community engaged research projects. They get some funding for some salary and funding for travel. And we've had about 5 fellows to date. And so they do things like, you know, so they do typical things. So the postdocs that have worked with me, they come to our lab meeting, they take a piece of a project and make it their own, kind of in the same ways that we do with traditional postdocs. So we've had about 5 to date. And so some of the work they've done since then. So our earliest postdoc was in 2013, and she is now an associate professor at Meharry. She leads some of our work in dissemination. One is at UGA. We have some have gone into industry. So they're doing numbers of different things in teaching. So we've had a pretty good success rate with folks can staying in, because the goal is, you know, we want you to continue doing community engaged research. We love them to stay at Meharry or Vanderbilt. Some of them left, but we're able to keep a few of them. So the next is kind of our community engaged research training curriculum. And so we have, now this is for researchers. We started the first one in 2016. And this was really for the first cohort of our, whatever scholars we had coming through that time, whatever the postdocs were. So this was kind of our first official pilot of kind of having something structured in community engaged research training. So you can see the topics here. So I don't know what we think of this title, the mystery reveal. There's no mystery, but you know, engage the community in research, ethics and community engaged research was really about all the things we know about, you know, being ethical in research. We talked about things, you know, beneficence and justice and respect for persons and all of those things for the researchers. Implementation science and obesity, that was really at the time our early launch into dissemination, and the particular person who was leading that was their kind of their research focus. Evaluating community partnerships. And the reasons that's really a part of the, you know, the research training is that, you know, you're working with community-based organizations, and research is not always the top thing they want to do, right? And so a lot of them want to evaluate the work that they're doing, but we also want to evaluate the impact of these partnerships, right? And so that there's an opportunity to see that everyone's, you know, giving and getting from the relationship. So that's a session that's conducted. And then there's a Nashville Neighborhoods 101. So most of researchers, I lived in Nashville for 20 years, but I can't tell you, I know about every neighborhood in Nashville. And so often people want to go and, you know, work with different communities, but just kind of having an idea of, you know, the demographics of community, what's important, what are the assets in these communities. So staying away so much from this kind of this deficit, you know, this is the food desert, and thinking about what are the assets in those communities. So we have someone who does a really good job of kind of the Nashville Neighborhoods 101. So that was in 2016. And then we did some, you know, additional training cohorts. And so we started to kind of do some, you know, looking at some of our evaluations and then thinking about ways that we can improve the training. And so one of our team members one day said, well, you know, we really need to think about, there's these power imbalances that happen, right? And so everybody has biases, right? And they're not all negative, but we all have them. And so, and I think this was an opportunity for us to kind of focus on cultural humility as part of the research training. And so we did a little bit of work with that, and we were like, okay, we don't know. We are not, and we found that there are people that this is their thing, right? So we hired a professional person to kind of help us think about what does cultural humility look like, and how do we even bring this to the forefront. And so that was this was that presentation, cultural humility, exploring culture, race, power, and privilege in our lives and in our places. And so, and one of the big things that was so important there was about, you know, in dealing with bias, right? So cultural competency is really important for a lot of reasons, right? But the limitations of cultural competency is that it often leads to bias. Now I can check a box. I know all there is to know about this culture, and there's nothing else. I've gotten my certificate, right? That's a limitation. It also kind of implies that competence implies that you're competent. There's no more work to be done, right? So there's a finality to the cultural competency. Whereas cultural humility says, it really helps you to think about looking inwardly about your own biases and how they play out and how you see people, and being open and curious about someone else and how they view life and in their shoes. And so that's really one that we wanted to add. And it's, you know, it's a little touchy-feely, and, you know, folks, and so we integrated that one. And so some of our recent cohorts, so these look, and some of these will look a little bit different than when we started with in 2016. So this is what they've looked like since 2020. So this is not in any order, but we did make it sure that cultural humility is the first session. We probably lose people like, this is not why I came here, but it was like, if you're coming, they'll come to the first one. So if they don't come back, they'll get cultural humility. So we made that the first one. The order is pretty random. Then there's the overview of community engaged research, which used to be our, you know, mystery revealed, you know, so that's the community engaged research 101. Building sustainable partnerships was a newer one. And that really talked about, working with community organizations and community members from the beginning and talking about those things, the things that make it difficult for us to partner sometimes, the trust piece, historical abuses that as researchers, we have to own. They are there, right? And so that's really about the partnership building. We talk a lot about, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the give-get model. It was developed by some folks out in ETSU, Eastern Tennessee State University, but it really has this model of when you're starting partnerships with community organizations or community members, where there's literally a grid. The researcher and the community partner says what they're gonna give and what they're gonna get. And you do this at the beginning of the partnership. So there's some transparency. So we're not the helicopter researchers, right? It keeps each group accountable and each group is seeing that they can benefit from that. So this is what it looks like now. Now we have, a true session that's focused on dissemination as well. So that's disseminating things beyond the traditional academic session. So lay abstracts, all those things. We've had Facebook Lives and all those different things, but it's really helpful helping people navigate. They develop templates and they kind of walk through a dissemination plan as well. So that's what they look like. They've looked like since 2020. When we started, of course, in 2016, they were in person. There were probably about 5 folks. And now, with the pandemic, we continued them. So we probably have 60 or 70 people coming virtually. Everybody can't attend all the sessions. So sometimes they can pick and choose and they kind of record those. And so they're open to faculty at Meharry and Vanderbilt. And as of late, we've had other folks trickling in who've heard about it. So we've kind of opened it up to other institutions in more recent years. So that was nothing else there on that one yet. So now I'll switch. So let me stop there. So I'm going to go on to the work that we're doing on the other core. Now remember, I'm just kind of giving you our experiences because I want to open up into hearing questions. But any questions or comments about anything I've shared already? Because I'm going to kind of go to the work on the other core that I'm involved with. Okay. So this is the Meharry Community Engagement Core, and it's it was established in 2017. The other one was established 10 years earlier. So this is a newer core, and this part of the research centers and minority institutions. So Meharry is a HBCU and is a part of this research network. And so I serve as director there. And so unlike the previous core, we don't have a specific team that's focused on training. But because we're right there together, we wanted to make sure that we're not necessarily duplicating, but there's kind of some synergistic things, right? So we have some training on this side, but the curriculum we keep with the other core and we kind of supplement. There's other components of this core is a recruitment component. So the previous core, there's not a focus on helping researchers support their recruitment and retention efforts. This one has a specific aim that's focused on recruitment and retention as well. And the other aims are pretty similar. And so the researcher training for this core, we also have a postdoctoral program as with the other core. We have some researcher training sessions and some guidelines. And so here's kind of what the postdoc, it looks pretty similar to the other one. We kind of use the same process for identifying folks. The experiences are pretty much similar. The 2 postdocs actually work a lot. We started this in 2017, and we've had about 1 fellow to date, and then we're currently recruiting for another position right now, but that's pretty similar to the other core. So again, having these levels where we have the professional students, and then we have the postdoctoral training, and then everything is available to, to all the faculty across both institutions. So for this current core that I'm talking about, the Meharry Community Engagement Core, so here's kind of what some of our training looks like. So we do have a dissemination team that really focuses on just dissemination. So here's a paper we published a while back about training researchers in dissemination of study findings. And part of that was kind of a needs assessment that we did with all the faculty first to kind of see what were the needs around dissemination. And so one of the questions, because anybody guess why folks are thinking about lay dissemination more? It's the right thing to do, but any guess?
Funders are requiring it.
Funders are requiring it. And so we asked this question, so why are you interested in it? And we put up, a third of them said because I'm required to. well, people are making, it's the right thing to do. It's the people are forced to do it. So there's a lot more interest. That's the reason there's a lot more interest in community engaged research, right? To be honest, it's been important, right? It's always been helpful. Community input has always been valuable. It's always going to help us move this T from T1 to T4, right? We have to have that input, but funding is driving a lot of that. So that's true. And so that's some of the feedback they want. They had to have a dissemination plan. And some of them want to help developing these plans. And so we did in this paper, we talk about the final module where we had some of the basic science researchers who actually disseminated some of their research, kind of shared quotes about the impact and on sharing their findings with communities, things that they learned about their communities and how it really, really helps. So that's just one paper that we did around dissemination. The other one, the recruitment and retention of minority and underserved populations, that was just a single training presentation where we really focused on a lot of things around ethics and you know, all the important things to do when you're including, recruiting racial and ethnic minorities and underserved populations. And then finally, there's along with that, we have a recruitment retention guidelines that people can use. So for this particular core, when people request service, if they say they want help with recruitment, we have, okay, do you have a recruitment plan? If they say yes, if they say no, we still have, they can download this to kind of use to follow. So they can kind of look at that prior to like a first consultation. So that's what we kind of do on this core to kind of complement the other core, right? So we're trying not to do too much overlap because we're all right there, always all leveraging those resources. And so here's a commonly used slide. In a lot of the training presentations that I give to researchers, community engaged research is not recruitment, right? But community engagement can enhance it. And so oftentimes we'll read people talking about in their proposals, you know, their community engagement is their recruitment. And that's not the same thing. I mean, we're thinking about recruiting people in studies. It's different than engaging community members in the work, right? From beginning to end. And so that we're not, you know, any of those that think we check the box of engagement because we're recruiting, that is not. And I mean, maybe I'm speaking toward the choir here, but it happens all the time where people believe that is what engagement is. That is not. And so, but it certainly can help, right? So think about the example this morning in the plenary session, she talked about just telling your stories, right? So you go to a community group or something, you might tell the reason why this is important. Then they might say, you know what? They might be on board with helping you recruit, right? It's not you just coming to them, I need your people, right? It's kind of engaging with them. And the other thing that's really, really helpful, we don't recruit well without asking the people who we're trying to recruit, right? The community members, you know, letting them see flyers, all these, that's a different presentation, right? But those are the types of engagement that can enhance our recruitment efforts that we all struggle with. I mean, it's just a challenge. So this is one that we kind of always share as part of our any of our training. And so I'm just gonna stop and I can answer some questions, but I'll just, because the part of this is kind of sharing our best practices. And so, you know, we want to target researchers at different training levels, provide diverse training platforms. I mean, everybody's had to go to Zoom to do everything, right? And people need things sometimes in smaller tidbits. Everybody doesn't need an hour-long presentation. So we're finding we need to do that in different platforms. We do, for the first curriculum that I showed you with the 5 to 6 sessions, we do provide CME credits. So we started just doing CMEs and then we started doing RCR credits recently, so people can get credit for participating in those. It's usually like during the lunch hour and people are happy that they can get those credits. So one of the things that we're really, really trying to do, so right now, our cores are doing these training sessions. So, okay, the Meharry Vanderbilt Community Engaged Research Core is offering this training curriculum. But what we're trying to do, we have so many different training programs for students across both institutions. So we're trying to make our trainings integrated to what folks are already doing. So at Meharry, we train medical students, right? And so our medical students have to have a research experience in their first year. And so how about we integrate some of these as part of what they're already doing? That makes it, we're getting it in there, and making sure people get the exposure. But I think one of the things is now integrating it. So our MSPH program, they're gonna make some of these modules required for folks before they do their research experience. And so that's kind of where we are now. So, you know, what would be great is that, you know, we have this here, we'll continue to update our trainings, but other programs are leveraging it, and we can make sure that it gets into integrated, because like we started saying, none of us have kind of had this formalized training, but I think we have to start somewhere and putting it in there. And as much as people don't like being forced to do things, sometimes that's where you can make sure it actually happens. So, I don't want to take up all the air in the room and talking about all this, but if there are any questions about what I've shared, but I really want to hear kind of other experiences that folks have had, questions about what I've shared, because this is just what we're doing. And I realize other people may have different needs and are already doing some other things. So I'll just stop there and take questions, or go ahead.
Can you describe a little bit more about the dissemination component training that you're doing? That's a fairly new area for me to get my mind wrapped around, especially as it comes to be more required in grants.
So a lot of the training focuses on, you know, number one, what is it that you're trying to disseminate, right? And because they're all the different dissemination, the people, different audience for dissemination. So there's one, so is this the paper that no, I think, so there's communicating results back to research participants, right? So you're gonna do that in a different way, right? And so some of that might be newsletters, just kidding people, if they're in a 5-year clinical trial, giving them study updates along the way. People have newsletters in that way. If you're targeting policymakers, you might not want to send them the same thing, right? You know, this is what is happening in your zip code, right? And so maybe there's these briefs that you do for policymakers, but it really focuses on, number one, knowing who your audience is, right? And how you can tailor your results to that audience. And it's not always results. And so that's one of the things that we say all the time. You can communicate, dissemination is not just the results. We think about with most of our research, we write the paper once we have the results, right? And so, but even thinking about things of kind of promoting community trust in our research. We've had radio listening sessions where we've had basic scientists describe why they're doing their research. Nothing else, no results. I'm a researcher at Meharry Medical College, and I'm interested in Alzheimer's. This is why it's important. And that was disseminating research. It wasn't the findings, right? But those were things that people could resonate with. And so we did the same thing with kind of Facebook Live. One of the other, the CERC is what we call it, the first core I mentioned. A lot of training goes into developing lay abstracts, which could be for research participants and different audiences. And so they go through developing templates for those and showing people templates, creating the templates. So that's what that kind of goes into, and kind of walking them through a dissemination plan too. And if you're working with a community organization, like including that community organization or that community group as part of that dissemination, right? And the main thing that I'm pretty sure one of our lectures for that has the slide is like, don't save it to the end. You got to be thinking about dissemination from the beginning, right? You're going to get because you have to prepare, right? When you're thinking about, if you wait to the end, somehow researchers were always thinking about the paper, right? We know that's the end. We know that, right? We know the table one that we're going to have. We have that all figured out, but we have to start thinking about how do we disseminate research to our community stakeholders early on. So that's kind of the focus of for both of them. That's kind of been the focus of the dissemination. Yeah. Yep.
For the people in your program, where are they coming from? Like, what are largely their backgrounds, and then what do they often go on to do?
For the pipeline programs, like the younger. So for the first program I told you, the year-long scholars program. So these are folks we've had mostly medical students and dental students. So these folks have gone on to medical school and dental school, but mostly for the graduate students who are the PhD program, they've gone on to get faculty positions to do research. Some of them, as I mentioned, go and work with these community-based organizations. Folks who are typically the people who apply for the scholars program they're already in. We're not trying to explain to them why community engaged research is important. They already have something that they're interested in. They have an organization they want to work with, and they want to help that organization, right? And so these folks are, these are activists, and so they, they go on and get their PhDs and they continue to do the work. So that's some of what we've seen with our cohorts. Some of them have come back and have been advisors to us on these programs. I went through this and this is how it could have been better. So they're helping us kind of do some of the tailoring. So that's what some of the folks who participated in the 1-year program.
I was actually gonna ask if any of them have created like a consultancy or a kind of business based around providing this type of feedback.
I'm not sure, but I know someone who has been called upon because of that a lot. I don't know if it's an established consultancy, but yeah, I'm not sure about that though. Yeah. Any other? So for folks who are responsible for training other folks, so what have you guys done already? Like, is there anything that I didn't share that you guys have kind of already done that others might be interested in?
Sorry, there's a question in the chat. Is this a postgraduate program only? The program you're referring to?
This one I was just talking about right now. Yeah,
Sorry.
yes. So this one is this one is just a postgraduate. Mhm. But it's really open. So for this one, that they can be, so we've had medical students, dental students, we've had PhD students, we've had MSPH students. Yeah, so and we kind of keep it pretty broad for that 1-year program. And we've had to make a lot of, so for the medical students, their timelines are a little bit different. They're doing, coursework the entire first year and trying to find the time. So we found we have to be a little bit flexible how we roll that out for different students. The PhD students had more time because they often have a defined time to kind of share their research and to focus on their research. So, yeah. Any thoughts from folks who've done this before? No? What would folks like to see in training? What do you think? Was there anything there that we didn't cover that you think probably should be in community engaged research training?
I mean, I personally think, it's helpful kind of, and maybe you do get into some of that, but I wasn't sure, based on the modules. If you get into some of the different types of methods, like in the details and nitty gritty of like, when you are conducting some of the research, is it focus groups? Are you doing interviews? Are you doing it at their setting?
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing it? Are you bringing them to you? Are you going to them? And also, I guess some just novel sharing of ways to engage the community partners in the entire research process. I guess an example, we did once was invited one of the patients and then one of the community organizations to be a part of the research panel.
Mhm.
They could come with us to the conference,
Mhm.
and, present with us and kind of be a part of all of, the experience. So, anyway, just a few other things, either methodologically or other aspects to engage the partners in.
I have a question. I guess what has been your training focus in, I guess, the grant writing process, so developing the actual research project around what are the community's needs?
Okay, so we get a lot of questions about that, but here's been most of our experience. So a lot of folks, and maybe this is a good thing, a lot of folks who are interested in kind of writing grants around this and kind of community needs, they kind of have talked to communities before and kind of have some input. What we have, and that's good, I guess, they've already worked with them in some ways. But what we recommend a lot, because it's a little, and this kind of gets to your question too, kind of about methods of engagement. This is not something we provide training in, but it's a model that one of our cores is pretty well known for, the community engagement studios. And so this was developed, anybody heard of those? Yeah. Developed in 2009. It's a way to kind of get feedback from community about research, any phase of your research. It can be from idea conception to dissemination, right? And they're kind of, people's like, well, what's the difference in focus groups? So they're not research participants. They are really your advisors, right? And so they are brought to the table to kind of, the researcher has to share kind of what is it that you want to hear from the community stakeholders. but someone else facilitates the session to get the feedback. And then we kind of provide them with a report. And so that's one of the ways that we offer people some support that we offer them. If you're interested in the community, you don't have any connection. And the nice thing is for this particular program, they don't have to recruit the people. So that's a service that we provide, right? So they don't have to look for, we call them community experts. They say, we're interested in African-American women with type 2 diabetes. We go and find those folks, we bring them together, we pay them their experts for their expertise and coming to the table. So we don't provide training in that because we do that for them as a service that we provide to them. The little bit of coaching that has to happen on that part, which is not a formal part, is helping researchers share their research in just succinctly, lay format, and being okay with letting the facilitator run the studio and just you sit back and let them run it. You can see how it'd be a problem. So there's so researchers are used to controlling the room and all those things. And we're really saying, we just need you to present what you want and we got it from here, right? But that's one of the ways that we have really kind of supported researchers in kind of getting this feedback from community. And, it's really nice for most of them because it doesn't, they're not research participants. It doesn't require IRB approval. So it makes things go a little bit faster, right? And all of those ways. So we use that one. I mean, this is a nationally recognized model that's used all over. It did start there, but that's one that they've heard about a lot. And so everybody's heard of PCORI. So when Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, so when they started putting out RFAs and they're requiring you to have this patient stakeholder feedback, we got bombarded. Because people were like, well, how do I do this? I'm really, really interested. And they wanted it formalized. So we got a lot of requests for support back there for that reason. People wanted to formalize it, even though they had it. And it was nice if someone else can kind of facilitate with them doing it. So not much training there, but it is something that's been really a huge help for the kind of researchers to kind of get that feedback. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we had to come in late
Mhm.
for other reasons. And when you say we, who is we?
So I represent two community engagement research corps. So there's the Meharry Vanderbilt Community Engaged Research Corps, which is part of the Vanderbilt Institute for Clinical and Translational Research, their CTSI.
You guys were the founders of, in my opinion, it felt like you were the founders of that concept.
Yeah, that's probably our claim to fame. And then the other one is the Meharry Community Engagement Corps, which is also part of the RCMI network. So when I say we, because I talked about the work we're doing on two different corps, one of my colleagues says kind of an incestuous group. So like I'm on both of them. And so many of us are, but so between our two institutions, right, there's like a handful of folks that are doing community engaged research. And many of them like me, I mean, I've been at Meharry for 20 years, been in Nashville for 22 years. And so I've always done community engaged research, but I've never been one, I mean, I have now, but didn't have this formal training. It was like the work that I wanted to do and we kind of did the work. But so these are the folks that are kind of leading these two corps. And so we all kind of spread pretty thin, kind of working on both corps, but sorry, yeah, that's the we that I'm referring to, yeah.
I was impressed with what Vandy did.
Mhm,
I've been able to attend one of their studios once.
mhm. Was it a live studio just to kind of see the feedback? It's a mock.
Yeah.
And we've had some opportunities for people to see the live.
COVID, so yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and now most of them, the team that facilitates those mostly, they're almost all virtual right now. So now they're trying to figure out how do we go back. But one of the interesting things that happened with that is that, now we're kind of comparing kind of the feedback that you get in person versus virtual. And depending on the topics, we found that people are being a lot more open virtually, right? And so we try to keep people, keep your cameras on and all that, but maybe people are more comfortable saying things behind their camera than they would be in the room. So for some topics, it may be best that it is virtual, but I think, yeah, there's been a lot of, I think the ones that have been most impactful, with the death of George Floyd, and there was a researcher that wanted know about the impact. And they were able to look at folks all across the United States in different groups. And it was happening to everybody at once. And the feedback that they got in there was so rich and so raw, and they could get it pretty quickly, right? Because it was, everybody was at home. We've seen some really great feedback. And I think that's one of the areas, and researchers who do the evaluations after that always talk about how much they've learned about the groups that they're interested in. We've had researchers to completely change their research design because they went back and they asked for this feedback. So it's really, really a powerful approach for sure. Thanks for saying that.
There's a lot of work that goes into that. You guys have done an amazing job.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, it is a lot of work, but I think it is really, really valuable. And so many of the folks who are the community experts that we bring there, we try to make sure that they have, because after you've been a community expert for about 2 or 3, then they start sounding like researchers, right? So we kind of have to make sure that so some of them have gone on to be on advisory boards, so thinking about these levels, right? Some of them are forming more advisory roles. Some of them are now patient partners on PCORI studies and community PIs. So we've talked about a lot, how many can you do before you're almost talking like us now, right? So we have to kind of put a cap on that, but always have opportunities for them to kind of do other work.
How do we get more information about this and how you do this? The consulting with the communities.
So there's a few papers on the studios that are out there. We did a conference, I don't have the links here, but we did a conference, PCORI gives out engagement awards. And so we did a conference during the pandemic, and that's like on their website and live, and it has YouTube videos showing all the steps she was talking about kind of in planning that's out there. Yeah, on YouTube. It's on the web. If you Google, PCORI Community Engagement Studio, it'll probably come up, and there's tons of YouTube, like in chapters.
Cool.
Yeah, and you can see those live. We recorded everything except there was a live C studio demonstration that for reasons we can't share that because these were actual participants, but everything else is there. And there's a few papers on it as well. Yeah.
Website.
So PCORI. Yeah. And I think we called it CE Studio Summit. So that was the title, that had to have a grant title. I think it was the PCORI CE Studio Summit. CE, like Community Engagement Studio Summit. Yeah, and so they're so good. So they're good at disseminating. So they have links to everything. So we don't, because we get these requests a lot. And then of course there are the papers as well too.
So how do you get your funding? I mean, obviously you probably got some great funding to kind of initiate and build the model and those type of things. How do you continue to fund? I can imagine that it probably takes some significant funding to do these studios.
So since inception, they've been, provided as part of the CTSI. So we have dedicated, we were talking earlier, so we have different teams for this course. So we have a stakeholder integration team. We have a team that focuses on dissemination. And then the team that I'm on for that one, we focus on training, right? And so we have dedicated folks that this is your area. And so when we started, for instance, with the studio, we had a studio navigator who was there from 2000, since inception, who's still there, right? And so training new people as they come in, but we've always had dedicated effort for that. And that would include someone who was helping to identify folks, someone who was helping with logistics. So we had a kind of a team. And then also the funds that we used to pay the community experts, those came from the CTSA funding. So that's been the infrastructure. We talked a long time about, that there are some other, because people were using this model across the United States. So we've partnered with other institutions that have now taken the model and they have developed cost centers. So they're charging investigators for it. Yeah, we have not gone that route, but that is a model that folks are using because it's so many people need it, right? And so we write these things into our budgets now for those places. So we haven't gotten there, but that is a model that some are using to kind of keep the funding going. Keep the support. Yeah, did you say Utah? Yeah. So they work with us for the summit that we mentioned. We work with University of Michigan and the University of Utah. There are two that have kind of have been using the model for a long time and as well, yeah.
So what's the volume that your team has to process like in a year?
For the studios,
Mhm.
slide,
And what's the ramp up time? Like if somebody says, okay, I have this project, I want to have a studio, like how long does that process take to actually get it all?
so we did just have a meeting about this. Now with our team size, if someone comes to them, right, and they say, we need a studio and it's less than 2 months, we can't do it. Because you have to identify you have to recruit people for the studios, the experts, right? And so that's usually the time limiting factor too, especially when they're recruits. People could be not in Nashville. They say, we have a study, we're interested in folks in Oklahoma. And so our team has actually been able to identify community organizations in Oklahoma to find people in Oklahoma for a studio for someone who lives for a researcher in Nashville. So that is the part that takes a little bit of time, right? You know, figuring out who those connections are. But yeah, I think the slide I saw last week was, you know, they kind of had a flow chart about, you know, when people, because they're getting so many requests.
That's what, like,
Mhm.
right, I mean, because you guys are filling a huge need in something that's really important for
Mhm.
research, so I can imagine the more it's successful and the more it gets out there, the more the requests come in.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we did with the summit. We had, we probably had, I don't know, at least 30 institutions that represented, so about 30 institutions that attended. Some people in Europe attended. And so most of these people, you know, we had a question at the end. And so most of these people were attending because they intended to adopt it in some way at their institution. So I think, you know, in recent years, we've seen less requests because I think people are starting to figure out how to do it and making their own tweaks to it. But they're all kind of working together, yeah. So we don't get all of the requests, but early on, we were getting them all. Yeah, but even just, you know, locally, they still have to say, if you need it, you know, sooner than 2 months, we can't help you, you know, yeah. Can't help you right now. We never turn around, we can't help you,
But not right now.
you know, in research, we never have emergencies, right? So like, we never need
Like I
anything,
did
right?
yesterday.
Right, right. Alright. Training, clear as mud, nothing else? Alright. I didn't have anything else. Go ahead.
So, because I wasn't here in the very beginning,
Okay.
if you don't have a studio in your institution or in your region, how do you work with the community if you're a researcher? How do you engage with? Are you training in that level?
No, we do. So part of, the second core I talked about, the Harry Community Engagement Core. So one of the components of that is the community academic partnership, right? And so we have a process. So if a researcher says they're interested in partnering with a community, they have no idea. So we as part of marketing for our core, we kind of ask community members and community-based organizations, are they interested in partnering with us on research? And we talk about the research that we're interested in, the health equity, health disparities research, if we're at community outreach events. And we ask people, there's a questionnaire, are you interested in partnering with us on research? So we have a database of a lot of community-based organizations and community members who want to partner, right? So if a researcher who comes to us and say they're interested in Alzheimer's, we're looking at our database, has anybody in the community, 90% of the time there's a community person who said they're interested, right? So what we began to do is then we can facilitate some meetings so we can make these connections, right? So what our core will do, we'll facilitate a meeting with the researcher to kind of get an understanding what they are interested in. We'll talk with the community-based organization. Hey, you fill this out. You said you were really interested. Let's hear a little bit more about your organization. We have this researcher who's interested in partnering. So we have separate meetings with them. And then we facilitate a bringing together, right? And so, you know, one of the things that we're talking to our researchers when have you had community engaged research training 101? You know, so we're kind of trying to prep, and we have so we didn't talk about this here. So we have a companion training for community partners as well. And so we want to make sure that they have research one, because one of the things we want to do, there are so many power imbalances. And I don't care what level of engagement, you want your community stakeholders to come to the table, sitting straight at the table. They feel like they have something good. The researchers don't know everything. They may be a researcher on that thing, but they're not a researcher on everything, right? And so you want the community members to feel like they have information and experiences that are valuable. So we do companion training with them, research 101, and we're thinking about ways that, when, for community-based organizations, when a researcher comes to you, here are the questions you ask them about what they want to do. So going back to that, so we facilitate those separate interactions between the researcher and the community-based organization. And then we kind of bring them together and kind of just have them both to kind of share the work that they're doing and seeing if there's any common, just because of organizations interested in Alzheimer's and researchers, they may not have the same goals. We kind of bring them together, right? To just kind of brainstorm on, what could a partnership look like? Just what are you guys doing? And so, that we kind of level set and set expectations with those, saying that you might not come back out of here with a research partner, right, from this community organization. Sometimes the contribution from the researcher is they want a content expert. So they're a breast cancer organization, and this is a breast cancer researcher. Sometimes they just want someone who's kind of knows the literature to come and kind of share with their groups. And that may be the end of that partnership, right? But that may be the beginning of a partnership as well. So we kind of help in that way, just bringing them to the table, making sure each partner is kind of have what they need to come to the table, making sure there's, researchers are getting effort. We're making sure there's money for a community partner to come, to have this, conversation. But we kind of facilitate these interactions as much as we can. So that's how, if they don't have any connections to the community. We also have community researchers who have a connection. They're like, okay, I know people here, but now what? So so we don't have to make the connections. They've already paired together. We just get them in the room, right? So they meet, researchers are out at community outreach events, so they know community organizations sometimes. And so we can help them kind of at any stage of that too.
So you help facilitate the discussion.
Mhm.
And people underestimate the need for skilled facilitators, what that means. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
So you have training for both the community advocates, and you have training for the researchers, and then you also help facilitate them coming together and seeing if there's a way to partner
Mhm.
and building expectations and stuff.
Mhm.
Great.
And oftentimes we're able to point them to, if sometimes there's a lot of grant opportunities that are for community academic partnerships. So we have a mini grant program as part of CERC as well. And so sometimes we can point them to here's an opportunity for you to go and apply for this partnership building grant. And so we're always trying to connect them to ways that they can get these ideas funded. And there's so many more ways that they can, do that now that are out there. But I think, it's been really, really interesting, mostly because at Meharry we're probably 80% basic scientists. So these folks are in the lab, right? And so what's been really, really rewarding is seeing these basic scientists who's doing this very, very, very basic research, going out to the Prostate Cancer Coalition of Tennessee and explaining their prostate cancer bench research. We've created these templates for them we don't just sit them out there blind. We review the presentation. We've learned we have to do that, and we create some templates. And so, but just going out, these community members or patients that they're writing about in the background section of their grant, they've never seen them before. They're just writing about them because they read about it in the paper, but going to this setting and seeing these African-American men with prostate cancer as part of their survivorship group, it's the things that they see. I think it really changes I think it really helps too, because research can get a little frustrating sometimes. You feel like, okay, am I getting anywhere? But like she said today, putting a face with this, right? It matters so much. And so that's been really, really rewarding to see, I think, because it can get a little discouraging sometimes. And one of the ways that we've been able to do this is not a training, but one of the ways we've kind of helped basic scientists to kind of think about this, especially if they've written an NIH grant. What do you have to have? A public health statement, right? They make you write one. You got to have one. Usually that's a good start for how your work relates to real people, even if you're just working with cells in the lab. And so we've kind of had, okay, just take your public health statement, just start there. You've already started to think about it. So sometimes they're a little bit closer. And so when you're thinking about presenting this to a community group, where does what you're doing fit in the big picture, right? If we need a cure for cancer, no one's gonna disagree that's important. But just show me in plain language how your work is gonna help that. And I think those public health statements, that's what they're getting at, right? And so we kind of start there with some of that, trying to, with those kind of lay presentation templates of some of the work that we do.
Have you guys developed a curriculum and is it an on-demand curriculum that other institutions or community partners can use?
So on our, I should have had some actual links. So on for the Harry Vanderbilt Community Engaged Research Core, because that's the old one, because we kept getting requests from people for these trainings, we did put those trainings online. So so if you Google Victor, which is for Vanderbilt Institute of Clinical Translational Research, Victor Community Engagement, there's a trainings tab under there for community engagement, and it has a list of all of our researcher and community trainings. And what happens is you hit the form, you get a red cap link, and then you kind of fill out, because we want to be able to, of course, write you back and say, how'd you use it? How was it, right? We got to get the information. Like, we wouldn't be good researchers if we didn't do that. So we do that, and then what happens is once you hit submit, we have it set up that the presentation will come back to you in an email. And so we try to make those presentations now, we kind of adapt them for online use too, and we kind of have instructions on, well, if you're using it for this, this is how you might do it. So it has some notes, like facilitator notes in that. And so we've had to do that because we were just getting so many requests from all across the continent for the training, so.
I think we want to request, so we need to get the link.
We'll email you.
And the thing is, so you know who you're talking to, I'm Cheryl and this is Kelly. We have been serving on Frontiers Patient and Community Partners Group. But like I'm a breast cancer by background, also cancer research, patient research advocate. And Kelly's with rare diseases. So that's where we're coming from.
Gotcha.
I mean, we've been peppering questions at you and
I know.
got, poor girl
Sorry.
doesn't
See,
even
that's
know.
back, they're strategizing too, like I said. We are. We are. Yeah, that's great. I don't know if there's a way for me, we have 3 more minutes. Maggie, well, I was trying to see if I could just show people where to go, but for the trainings though, I was just wanting to tell you, because if that's, so you can kind of see, go ahead.
I mean, 145. We gotta keep on.
45, okay. Is this gonna, for our person that's zoomed in, we'll be okay?
For Dr. Pelfrey and presenting next.
Okay. I was just gonna go to the internet just so you can see where to go. But if you Google Victor Community Engagement, there's literally a community tab up there, our resources, and it has like the online training session. So you'll see some for the community members and researchers on there.
When you say Victor, it's spelled V-I-C-T-R. P-R. Yeah, not Victor.
Like with the actual
And then it's .org Community Engagement Studio. So it's VICTR.VUMC.org.
Yeah, so if you go community engagement up there.
Engagement.
See, what we do, I think that's where it is. See here, training modules down there. And so there's some of those trainings, like there's training for researchers, so you don't have to click that, but if you click the blue, then you should go to the red cap link where you can request it. And don't be surprised if you do, then about 6 months later, it's like, well, did you use it? How was it? Did you modify it? What did you have to do it? So, yeah, so that's out there. Oh, and this is one that I didn't mention, that we don't offer this one as much now in our in-person sessions, but there's kind of the art of recruitment. So that's kind of like the recruitment and retention one. But that one is not offered. It's still kind of can be an on-demand one, but it's not as part of the actual curriculum for that particular core. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the Nashville Neighborhoods 101 module? Because that's obviously one that you can't export to us and we could reuse, but maybe as a model.
What about it?
As a model, and who are your experts on that? What do you cover?
So this particular person who did that one is, she's a social worker who's worked for our Core now. And so she just was a person, and probably other people who kind of lived in Nashville for a long time and just kind of knows the neighborhoods. But we've had so many, different little pockets, probably like most areas, right? So someone who's just kind of familiar with Nashville and the neighborhood, the different demographics. We have so many different immigrant populations, and oftentimes they're concentrated in certain areas. And then what they'll have is kind of outside of the demographic, what are the community resources there? What are the needs there? All of those different things. So it's really kind of a high level, but Nashville has so many different pockets of different groups. And so typically it's just, but it's really enlightening, because even for me who have lived there a long time, and you just don't know. And most of us are sitting in the office, right? And so that's how that one kind of plays out. Just whatever those major areas of Nashville, and you can do that one. You're right, you can't port that one over, but yeah, and people can do that for their locations as well. And if you know people, what's helpful then to add to is, are there community organizations, are there already leaders? As much as we like to think they're not gatekeepers, there are gatekeepers. And sometimes you need to know who those gatekeepers are. That might be the first person you need to meet. So all of that's pretty helpful and included in there. The person who does that presentation, if that was on there, that's probably a presentation that won't have a lot of, she shares a lot of pictures, but she does, and her slides won't have a lot of words, but all of them have facilitator notes at the bottom. So if you open up something, you'll see the notes in the bottom. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Yes, the next session will start at 1:45, and in here we will be having. Forget the title of the next session, correct? Next section in here is evaluating research equity, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion programming for translational science benefits. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Pelfrey, Dr. Tom, or Ms. Thomas, Dr. Thomas, we're transitioning right now, so maybe a few minutes before the next session starts. So I don't know who has slides that they want to share. Okay, you can go ahead and probably share your screen.
Oh, the next presenter is virtual.
Yes, but
Oh,
yeah.
I was trying to get out of the way. Did not know that.
I'll just say a few introductory remarks, and then Gelise is going to talk first.
Perfect. Thanks, babe.
Later
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah, sounds good.
Hi. Yeah, so this one is both prisoners and virtual. So. Okay, well then. So, transitioning. We'll give it a few more minutes. This will probably be mostly virtual attendees, given that the other session doesn't have a virtual option.
Should we go ahead and get started?
I say go ahead and get started. We only have one other attendee in the room with us here, so
Okay. Hopefully they can see the screen.
yes, they can.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Clara Pelfrey, and my colleague is Gelise Thomas. Gelise and I are speaking today about different sides of promoting community research. Gelise creates incredible programming to engage researchers and community members in discussions about health equity, which she will talk about first. And then I will talk about helping Gelise evaluate the work she's doing, as well as several other ways I'm evaluating research about health disparities and research that results in community and public health benefits. We'll have, at the end of each of our talks, we'll have about 5 to 7 minutes for discussion. Gelise, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Clara. All right, the title is long, but it's important. We're evaluating research equity, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion programming for translational science benefits. And this photo backdrop, it means a lot to us at the CTSC because this is the first drop that created this ripple effect for our Color of Care screening series that you'll learn about in a bit. But as you can see, my colleague here, kind of in the front row-ish, Dr. Pelfrey, and they are at the Western Reserve Historical Society. And it was just a great moment and a great photo to look back on and reflect on the work that we've done over the past year. So I'd like to share a little bit about one of my favorite TED Talks. It's called, "If You Want to Solve Big Problems, Think Like a Bee." So a little side story, I was stung by a bee on my middle finger when I was in elementary school. I was hysterical. So from that point on until kind of early adulthood, I said, I am terrified of bees, but I actually love bees. And I love this analogy, the fact that a bee lives for about 6 weeks in the summer, and they only make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in their lifetime. And if you can picture that, I mean, that's tiny, and you might think, oh, that's insignificant, but it's really not. And it's the work that we all do, especially in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space. It's so exciting to be a part of this. And we have this urgency and we want to see change right now because we feel like it's overdue, and it is overdue. But I just want you to keep that in your mind as you listen to the work that we've done. So right here, this is the big picture, but it's also our 1/12 teaspoon of honey. So we have our Mission Health Equity Challenge series, and that was a 4-part interdisciplinary multimedia challenge series that involved all of our hospital affiliates and community members. People from CTSAs nationwide were able to partake. Many of these events were either hybrid or virtual. And then you can see a photo of our panelists up there, local health equity and health disparities experts, clinicians. And then we have our Ready Special Populations Roundtable Talks. And this is one of 3 educational tracks that we launched that is really just trying to support our researchers on their health equity journey. And we invite people from the community to talk about the special populations that they serve. So that could be race and ethnicity with the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition. It could be disabilities with the Cleveland FES Center, or even geography. We're inviting some of our public health agencies to come and talk about how they serve people in rural communities. And then we have our Ready Research Policy Impact series. And blame this on my law background, but I believe it starts and ends with policy. If we don't have policy in mind and policy impact in mind from the beginning of the work that we're doing, why are we really doing it? We need to ensure that we are supporting researchers on their research journey, but especially with developing what their intentions are for the impact of their policy. So Dr. Pelfrey will explain a lot about that during her presentation. And then we have our Ready Community Engagement series, which we just launched this week. Super impressive panel of people who are figuring out how to engage community members as researchers, broadening that definition of what researchers are. And then finally, you'll see here kind of in the middle, we have our Heritage and Awareness Months. So we just finished our Black History Maker series that acknowledged and celebrated local and national Black history makers. It's great to look back on, the past achievements and things that people from the Black community have contributed to society, but who's doing the things now in this kind of volatile, but also exciting environment that we live in. And this gentleman right here, his name is Joel Burvell, and he is a social media mythbuster, medical mythbuster, and he's talking about racial disparities in the healthcare system and just doing a lot of great things that we haven't seen in years past, probably because social media, has been on the rise, but now we see how it can be a very powerful tool for disinformation and misinformation. And this was one of the first steps that we took on as we were embarking on this Mission Health Equity Challenge series. This is our logic model, and I give many kudos to Dr. Pelfrey. This was my first time creating one. And she provided numerous resources, and then we just collaborated and combined our brain power to present to you what you see on this screen. So we have our inputs, what we invested, and it largely rested on partnerships with external organizations and CTSC personnel. And then our activities, what we did, we screened a film, we discussed a book, and we hosted a panel and organized an unmeeting and evaluated programming. And then we look at our outputs. So the number of participants and event attendees, et cetera, as you see there. And then we have our short, midterm, and long-term outputs. So the changes in learning, changes in action, and changes in conditions. And there's a lot on this page, and we tried to condense it, but we are really excited that we're already seeing midterm outcomes, changes in action. Health providers are using their mobile healthcare units to produce these healthcare screenings and provide, food pantries and just doing all the things that we want them to do that they might have already been doing, but now they see it in a different light. They see it in a translation framework. So here's our timeline for the Mission Health Equity series. We launched it in September 2022. And again, back to the ripple effect, after the first screening that we hosted with the Western Reserve Historical Society, everybody wanted to do it. Metro Health, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, the Cleveland Lewis Stokes VA Medical Center. And then in October, we launched our 8-week book challenge or book discussion rather, and it was centering the book, Why Are Health Disparities Everyone's Problem by Lisa Cooper. And we had just a really great turnout, a great mix of people from the community and our research community as well. And then we had challenge number 3, the Community Organization Research Experience Panel, and challenge number 4 is actually next Thursday. You are welcome to attend that. It's our Health Disparities Unmeeting. We currently have 250 registrants nationwide. So let's look at this photo. So again, the first ripple or the first drop of water was that first screening that we had. And we've seen the ripple effect also happen with our book discussion, but these rings just keep growing and it's just really exciting to watch. So here is our color of care screening and how that ripple was produced. We started with our team and the Western Reserve Historical Society, and then we, again, Metro Health, University Hospitals, Cleveland Clinic, and the VA, those are our hospital affiliates. They all hosted one, if not two screenings, followed by post-event discussions with their experts. And now they are, on that journey of walking the talk. They watched it, they reflected, they felt their feelings, but now they want to put those feelings into actions. And, it goes back to our logic model, changes in behavior. And then from those screenings, we were invited to talk on WKYC's We the People. So we talked about what translational science was and why we were screening the film, what was in the film, and then what we expected and hoped to see moving forward. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we were invited by the United Way of Greater Cleveland to lead a discussion after their screening about health equity. What can we do? What can they do? They do a lot with supporting individuals in our community with working through the social determinants of health and really thriving in the workforce. So we injected that piece about health equity. And then we have our 8-week book discussion here. And we had participants from each of these institutions leading discussions. So as an example, the Deloitte Center for Health Equity, they kicked off the 8-week book discussion, and they would tell us about things that they're working on in terms of the health equity space and the impact that they're trying to make. And then we so happen to learn that they're looking to get into the academic medical research space. So that's an opportunity for people on that call to reach out and potentially access funding. But then we had someone from Enlightened Solutions. This is an organization that is trying to make Cleveland a better place for women in terms of workforce, education, and healthcare. And they launched this project called Project Noir, where they interviewed hundreds of Black women in Cleveland to find out exactly why Bloomberg City Lab said Cleveland is the worst place to live for Black women. And then the outer ripple that's still rippling is what you see right here to the far right. The 7th Annual Cancer Disparities Symposium actually chose this text based on participation in the book discussion to be their central text for their 7th Annual Cancer Disparities Symposium. And then my colleague, Dr. Pelfrey, will talk about how she took one of the case studies from the book and infused it into her health professions class that she does. And then there's another ripple that she'll tell you about as well. Our third challenge in our series was to attend a community organization research experience panel. And this was really neat because this is the community. This is who we're doing it for. And this is our why, our North Star. So we had individuals from the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland, the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, and Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, which is the governing body for all of our community development corporations, come and talk about their initial impressions of being involved in research, both on an individual level, because we know that that matters, and then from the organizational level, what it would mean for somebody who's representing the LGBT Community Center, knowing that this is a special population that's typically underrepresented in research. How do they protect the relationships and trust that they've built? But they also know that individuals from the community need to be reflected in the studies on the work teams or the study teams. And it's just really important. It's a lot to process, but we are willing to be the first ones out there, not the first ones, but one of the first people out there in groups that's really amplifying the importance of building relationships with community orgs that are already ingrained in the fabric of the communities that we are trying to reach through research. And if you'd like to watch this, I included the YouTube link on our YouTube channel at CWRU-CTSC, and you can watch we tape everything. You can watch all of these programs, the discussions on our YouTube channel. So again, with the 3 tracks that we launched this year, the Ready track, so Research Policy Impact Series, the 3 topics that we're exploring this year, and we've already done this one with Dr. Pelfrey and Dr. Bogle-Toley, the CTSC Research Impact on Legislative, Regulatory, or Practice Policies. So Dr. Pelfrey talked about, she really did a fantastic job level setting with the group, the importance of thinking about the impact of your research on policy, how it has been done, showing those examples. And then Dr. Boboltoli talked about how her research actually has influenced practice policies internationally. And then we'll have individuals from the Ohio Health Policy Institute come and give us a Health Policy 101 talk to, again, level set with our group. And then we'll focus on a local perspective, medical research as a tool for influencing public policy. With our special populations roundtable talks, I talked about the different categories or diverse identities that we are focusing on for this next year. We've already had 2. We talked about people with physical disabilities, so movement, and then we had the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition talk about African Americans in the Black community, and Ivanka Hall took it all the way back to slavery and just the evolution, the history that's so important to know about so that you have context and understanding when you're approaching special populations and inviting them to be a part of research, why the reaction, you might get different reactions. So it's just being prepared for that. A lot of her information is helpful in that regard. And then we have the community engagement piece. How to engage community members as researchers. I can't talk enough about that one. This is the team that led that discussion on Monday. And right here you see we have clinicians, administrative staff, Sheena Brooks, she was integral in recruiting and building relationships. And then we have actual Black male fathers. This study was about Black male fathers and how they navigate the healthcare system, who are telling about their experience both as patients and then as community researchers. And then the other topics that we cover in the community engagement series are building relationships with community health workers. This, in my opinion, is a really untapped resource. Community health workers, they are sometimes treated as social workers. They make it very clear that they are not social workers, but that they play a pivotal role in building those relationships and maintaining them. And if we respect the scope of what they do, there is a place for research in the discussions that they have with the community. And then we have the getting involved segment that is geared towards our community. So how do you become a community researcher? And then joining community advisory boards and institutional review boards. The Heritage and Awareness Months, we've had the highest attendance at these, and maybe to no surprise, it's because the content is accessible to pretty much anyone. If you're not doing research, this would be something that you'd want to attend, but we use it as an avenue to reach potential workforce pipelines in terms of people who might be nurses and not know about clinical research careers. But as you see here, these are our local and national celebrants for our Black History Maker series, and we just launched our fireside chats with leading ladies. We're talking with pretty much women who have reached the highest of the heights at their respective organizations locally. And this is a quote from an attendee of Michelle Browder's talk. She's an artist, activist, and the brainchild or visionary behind the Mothers of Gynecology Monument in Alabama. Someone said this was an excellent presentation, very impressed with the passion shown and the work being done to honor these women, the mothers of gynecology, and showcase the ethical dilemmas related to disparities that could potentially still exist. Thank you. So some of the challenges with the work that we're doing, but specific to the Mission Health Equity Challenge series, was inconsistency in data collection. And we were figuring out what would be the best mechanism to capture the data. So Google Docs doesn't work with everyone, but we ended up figuring out that RedCap would be the best choice for us. But the data collection was still inconsistent because a lot of it was manual. And then capacity, we have a wonderful, small but mighty team. And for me to be the central person behind these activities, capacity is an issue. So we look forward to growing the team that is supporting a large amount of the DEIA activities, and then having more resources, having a budget for the work that we're doing. And then we have lack of documentary ownership to confirm virtual viewership. So what that means is that we did not have control of the documentary. So we really don't technically know the exact number of people who watched it. We suspect that it's more than what's been reported, but just as an example, someone said that the Cleveland Clinic had over 800 people watch the film, but no one completed the survey. So those are the kinds of challenges that we're working through as we plan for the next iteration of this. And then promotion for voluntary events. All of these events are not required to attend. You don't get CME. So when we ask people to share with their groups, what's the incentive? What's the carrot? So we're also working towards building more carrots, or growing more carrots rather. And then opportunities. We have opportunities to co-create amongst partner affiliates for our second year. We have our planning meeting on the calendar. It's March 22nd, so really looking forward to that. And then improved data collection by streamlining REDCap efforts. Dr. Pelfrey is an absolute champion, and I just love working with her because she's really pushing me with this data and this analysis, and I look forward to continue to grow in that area. And then targeted marketing with a theme. So we're thinking about focusing on women's health equity next year. And we'll see how that pans out, but it looks like some of our Heritage and Awareness Months have led us down that path, and it's natural, it feels good, it feels organic, much like the start of everything that we've done over the past year. And then we hope to provide or plan to provide CME credits to attract greater participant diversity. And you'll see when Dr. Pelfrey goes over the data from the surveys that we did not have many men attending these programs. Key takeaways: show and tell, document, document, document. We have a ready news feed on our website where we write up about pretty much every event or webinar that we do, and we try to highlight the key takeaways. We upload everything on YouTube, and when people see this journey, when we look back on the journey as we continue to improve year after year, that showing and telling, and when you ask for money, it's proof that this is really important work and it works. Meet people or organizations where they are. There were a lot of things and plans that we had in place and hopes that we had for the challenge series that ended up exceeding expectations, but they were nonlinear, and that's okay. So we met people and organizations where they were. And then start with evaluation in mind. I'm sure Dr. Pelfrey loves that, but she's absolutely right. You cannot start to think about evaluation in the middle or the end. It's too late then. And then find comfort in the unknown. There were a lot of unknowns, like one of our institutions couldn't access the REDCap survey. So IT, have that support on your team if you can. And then the ripple effect knows no boundaries. And I'll let you interpret that. But just really taking that picture, taking a lot of the things that we've mentioned, and just know that when you just start something, when you're willing to start, you don't know where it'll go, with the best intentions and that continued positive attitude, I think you'll be surprised with your outcomes, especially in the DEIA space. And here are our acknowledgements. We thank all of our hospital affiliates for supporting the work and being those advocates for change and advancement of health equity. And thank you so much for listening and joining us. And you can connect or follow with us through any of these avenues that you see on this slide. And now, opening the floor for discussion. And I'd like to pose a question to the group, if I may. Since we've talked about policy quite a few times throughout this talk, what do you think, what drives what? Policy drives research, or does research drive policy? And I'm happy to look in the chat if there are any questions or comments.
I can facilitate questions. If we have any from the room here. We've had more join us here in the room.
Well, to kind of answer her question, I would argue that research drives policy. I've done a lot of work with the American Medical Association, and when students or any resident faculty positions like draft resolutions that go to the House and it gets voted on, like we have to make a really good point of citing those things with sources that have been published in the last 5 years, and then that will in turn spark discussion and shape policy, at least on the healthcare side. I think unfortunately we live in a time where a lot of healthcare issues are like highly politicized. I think we saw that with COVID-19 a lot. And so I think research like this is really important because it tends to be that the underserved, the marginalized populations that are affected most by this misinformation in that discourse. So I wanted to applaud you and the work you're doing, because I think it's really cool. And Joel Brevel is actually a friend of mine, and so I was really we know each other, and then I kind of ushered him into that AMA space, and so I really did appreciate seeing him included in this. I think this was amazing.
Wow, thank you so much for your feedback. And that is so cool that you're friends with him.
Maggie, while we're waiting for people to think of questions, could you tell us how many are in the room, just out of curiosity?
8, 9, 10, 11, including myself.
Oh, cool.
Has anyone seen The Color of Care? Or read the book that Why Are Health Disparities Everyone's Problem?
Shaking heads. I was gonna say, if you're in the room, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself too, since, I mean, they can't see you, so.
Of course. This is Rebecca Leffing from KU Med. I was curious about the ripple effect and what the furthest ripple that you've seen that was the most unexpected of the work that you're doing.
The most unexpected.
I have one in my top.
Oh, yeah. So that would have been the one that I would have introduced because I don't even know the full bounds of it, but it's so cool. I would say the most unexpected are ones that I can't prove. Someone reached out from one of the VAs, and it was in Virginia, I believe. They wanted to host a screening at their church. So I filled out the form, connected them with the picture motion team, but I don't know if they actually did it. And then someone else approached about hosting a screening with their nursing sorority. But again, I don't know if they did it, but that was totally unexpected.
Anyone else have questions? Or feedback?
Yeah,
We like feedback.
we love feedback.
My husband always says feedback is a gift. You have to look at it that way.
Maybe there's an opportunity to host a screening with some of the people in the room.
Yeah,
So please reach out if you're interested.
it's super good. It's a documentary with Oprah Winfrey as the moderator. All right, well,
Thank you.
yes, I can start. Let me get my slides going here. So I didn't repeat the whole READY thing. You heard it, but it stands for Research Equity, Accessibility, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I'm talking about evaluating that programming and also demonstrating the translational science benefits that have come from it. So today I'm going to talk about evaluating that programming, the health equity programming, evaluating the impact using what are called translational science case studies, which is another piece of research that I do with a large number of other CTSAs, researching publications to uncover the policy impact from the research publications that we have, and also using the translational science benefits model to understand community health benefits from trainees in our program. So that's why I had the big network diagram. I'm talking about a lot of things and I'm connecting a lot of dots. So about the Color of Care film screenings, again, we only started this in September of last year. So, and we had over 242 attendees that we could confirm, and an additional 800 or more at the Cleveland Clinic that we could not confirm. But this is the demographics of the people that attended those Color of Care screenings. Very good representation of race, ethnicity, maybe not so much. But the main people who attended were administrators, nurses, clinical researchers, and then of course doctors and other kinds of community outreach people attended. But I think the most interesting finding for us was that the people who attended were 90% female, as Gelise mentioned. And we'd love to talk about that afterwards, if the ideas you all have and ideas for getting men to come to these things. So the first column in that outcomes of the logic model was learning, knowledge. What do you gain, from these programs? So 86 people answered our survey, which is a pretty decent response rate if you know something about response rates. 36%. And we asked questions about how much new information did you learn about health disparities? And over 76 people said that they learned a moderate or a significant amount about health disparities at this. And this small amount probably doesn't mean they were sleeping through it. It probably means they already knew a lot. So, and then we also asked how well, from the program, how well do you understand the roots of distrust of the medical community? And then almost 80% said a lot of understanding. And similarly, when we asked about how well do you comprehend the difference between equality and equity after attending these programs, again, around 72%. So really good, knowledge gain. Then we asked questions about racial bias. How well are you able to recognize racial bias? Again, pretty decent numbers said a lot and somewhat. And how familiar are you with ways to remediate racial bias? Again, 72% said a lot and 36% said somewhat. So this is probably, the people attending this are a pretty savvy crowd. But now you're going to the second column in that logic model and asking, what sort of changes in behavior have you had after this program? And some of them may be as a result of the program, some may not, and we will never know the answer to that, I don't think. But we asked if they had taken action to mitigate health equities. And we asked whether they'd done it collectively with other people, and 51% had, and taken action for themselves, and 39% had. That is really encouraging number. We also asked them, how are you being or encouraging being an upstander? And again, encouraging other people, 84%, and being an upstander, 85%. So we feel like, behavior-wise, these people are really putting their, money where their mouth is. They're doing the action. But the qualitative data is some of the most interesting. And I just like to read this big purple bullet here. As part of a community outreach team, I'm encouraging events in areas that might not otherwise have access to free health screening. We are in the process of setting up free screenings in conjunction with food pantry pickup. As we know, transportation can be a hurdle for many. So if they are already there picking up pantry items, why not offer free health screening? Fingers crossed we can build trust and provide a good resource for many. That one was really encouraging. And then I liked this one, recognizing and openly commenting on potential biases or perceived moments of doubt in a fashion that otherwise could be considered taboo to address. So speaking up with as much humility and well-intentions as possible throughout the work life. I really liked those comments. Now this is qualitative data from following the book discussion and asked how people are being upstanders specifically. And I'm going to read the bright pink one because it happens to be my quote, and it's one of those ripples. I'm using the 5 Miles Apart story from Lisa Cooper's book to help teach about health disparities and how they can stem from historical events and social structures. I'm facilitating a session with up to 9 different types of health professions education students, over 500 students, in the Collaborative Practice 1 class. So our health education campus has this huge class with all the health professions in it. And I was able to take something from the book discussion and use it to help them learn about health disparities. And then the next piece of that, truly the ripple effect was surprising me. They used those same cases, real life case studies, in teaching the students about systems thinking. So the health education students created this crazy looking diagram here called a closed loop diagram. This is a systems thinking thing. And it basically helped connect all the pieces parts of one of those cases. And it'll say if it's a reinforcing loop and whether it has a positive effect or a negative effect. And this is how systems thinkers and how they approach these sorts of really wicked problems. So that encouraged me that we were having multiple ripple effects. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit now and talk about translational science case studies. So this Dr. Umit Gurkin is one of our pilot awardees at our CCSA. And he developed this device here called a heme chip. And we wrote a translational science case study about his research entitled A Retrospective Case Study of Successful Translational Research, the Gazelle Hemoglobin Variant Point of Care Diagnostic Device for Sickle Cell Disease. Now, what's really cool about this is he designed it, he's an engineer, and he designed it specifically to help get testing for sickle cell into low resource countries that have high incidence of sickle cell disease, like Africa and India. And he succeeded in doing that. He got it manufactured overseas. He got the device into those countries. And so for our case study, we looked at the entire timeline from the time he got his pilot award from the CTSA to help design and develop this thing, all the way through all these various steps. And he did trials, and he did got major publications. And at the very, very end, you can see in June of 2021, the newborn screening test received regulatory approval. So to us, he's gotten all the way to regulatory and really has achieved something. And is in the bottom right hand corner here, we said investing in innovation for underserved populations really saves lives. So again, we're also looking at other ways that research has gone, all our research that's supported by the CTSC has gone all the way to policy. And one way we do that is by looking at policy document references. And we do that with a website called overton.io. So this is a really important one that came out of it was a multi-center trial, but it was the head people were in Cleveland at University Hospitals. And it was called the SPRINT study. And it was a study to confirm that controlling blood pressure from at 120 systolic pressure was critically important in preventing heart disease and stroke. And so we basically followed along from that initial paper that was in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2015. We talk about how our CTSC supported it during the clinical research units. That paper was eventually cited in over 60 different policy documents from all over the world. In 2019, it helped the American Heart Association design new clinical guidelines so that the new target was 120 systolic pressure. And the human health impact was a 25% lower rate of cardiovascular events, and even more important, a 27% lower risk of death. But relating to health disparities, Blacks and Hispanics have higher rates of uncontrolled blood pressure, and Blacks are at greater risk of hypertension-related cardiovascular disease, morbidity, and mortality. And one of the best parts about the SPRINT trial was that they had 30% Black and 11% Hispanic participants. And having sufficient numbers of minorities in the trial meant that the dramatic results were also statistically true for those minority groups. That does not happen very often in large trials because it's very difficult to get significant numbers of minorities in those trials. Another important study that came out of our CTSA was hyperglycemia and adverse pregnancy outcomes, again published in the New England Journal back in 2008. Again, our clinical research units at our Metro Health Hospital helped perform the old glucose tolerance tests for that study. The paper ended up being cited by 33 policy documents and in 23 different clinical guidelines. And some of those clinical guidelines were the World Health Organization changed guidelines and 24 others that were published in PubMed Central. And in terms of human health, the WHO new 2013 guidelines were recommended glucose cutoff values for the gestational diabetes mellitus are lower than those recommended by earlier guidelines. So really, they had to change how they monitor people as a result of these studies. So now I'm going to switch gears slightly once more and talk about the translational science benefits model. This is a model, a new framework for assessing health and societal benefits of clinical and translational sciences, and it came out of the researchers at Washington University. And it's sort of, their conceptual model of this is you put in resources, you do your research activities, eventually you translate and get scientific outputs such as publications and grants. And then if you take it even further and disseminate and implement into the real world, get it out of the hospitals and into the clinics, get it out into the public health arena, then you have benefits that can really be called societal benefits. And those include clinical, such as new kinds of procedures, new clinical guidelines, tools, devices, products, community and public health benefits, which I will talk a little more about, include health activities, care programs, and health promotion. Economic benefits like new commercial products, financial savings and benefits. And also, as we talked about in Gelise's talk, really important to get policy and legislative benefits, including advisory activities, policies, and legislation. So I went looking for these translational benefits from our KL2 scholars, the trainees that learn to be clinical and translational scientists. And particularly, I was looking in that community and public health arena. So here's one of our KL2 scholars, Marissa McGinley, and she has helped develop consumer software. And you see a picture of the app on a cell phone. It's a smartphone tool created to improve distance healthcare for multiple sclerosis patients. And it's also been developed to gather Parkinson's disease neurological vital signs during the COVID-19 pandemic, when basically those individuals had to stay home, but they still needed to gather data. So that's a really important outcome. Sorry. Our next one is Tom Fraser. Tom works in the autism research field, and he helped develop this neurobehavioral evaluation tool for autism. So it's software called the virtual IPM or the neuro IPM, and it's used to administer the parent report questionnaires and to administer webcam collected patient performance measures. So a lot of times the physicians need to know what their child is doing at home, and the parents can do it sort of live on their cell phones or something using this sort of thing. He also got a patent for the adaptive psychological assessment tool. So it is published on the site for autism, this autism monitor. And finally, Kavita Arora works in the area of ethics, and she helped develop guidelines for the sterilization of women, ethical issues and considerations by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists Committee on Ethics. And she also used the information that she got to as a basis for her R01 grant, studying sterilization disparities in the community. So just to summarize what I talked about, our program goal for the CTSA at our site is to translate research findings into improved public health. And I've talked today about evaluating the health equity programming, and we're really curious about will research follow from that. And the unmeeting that Gelise talked about is one way to get researchers and community members interested in this together. And hopefully that will be the start of some new research ventures in health equity. Secondly, I talked about evaluation research using a translational science case study to uncover impact, something that was invented, a small device, but is now saving the lives of countless babies in low resource countries. I also talked about researching the policy documents to uncover the policy benefits that have come from research at our CTSA. And finally, I talked about the translational science benefits model to help to begin to understand benefits from society from the research that our KL2 scholars have done. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Do you have any questions in the room?
I'll ask a question. Can
you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so Nikki Nolan from University of Kansas School of Medicine. Could you talk a little bit about the process that your scholars or researchers have used to take their research findings to influence policy? And that's not easy. And a lot of times there are steps that need to be taken for that to occur. Just curious a little bit more about that process.
I wish I could answer your question. I don't really know that process because I only recently deployed a survey to ask our scholars about benefits in clinical or public health or policy or economics, and I asked them to give me an explanation. Some did, some didn't. And they don't go through their whole process. All they do is talk about the endpoints, right? So I'm looking at it from the endpoints, and if I want to discover the steps along the way, I would have to go interview them. And actually, I'm hoping to do that because I run a whole research group that looks at these case studies, and we would like to find more case studies, particularly of people who've done research in the community arena and may have informed policy. But that's one really big value of the case studies, is that then you interview more than just the PI. You interview several people related to the research and get the story from several angles, and then you can put together a whole case study. And we've even published a protocol for doing translational science case studies. But yeah, I can't really answer how they got there. It is
There's a question in the chat. The interview with 6 individuals, how did you determine that the sample size was good enough? How was the text from the interviews analyzed?
Oh, from the book discussion, that one, the reason I showed only the qualitative quotes was because it was a really small sample size, and I didn't try to make any inferences about, anything really. I just was showing you what they said in terms of their quotes. But yeah, I gathered the data again from a survey, and I didn't try to do any further qualitative data analysis on it because it was such a small sample size.
What would you do differently moving forward as we come upon this second year of doing the Health Equity Challenge series?
In terms of evaluation?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, it's still very early. I feel like we're early in the process. We're still just expecting to find, what have they learned from the various programming that we have done? And the true test would be if we've, made them interested enough to come to the unmeeting or one of the other sessions and decide that they really want to study this, that they want to do research. That I think our ultimate outcome in the final part of that logic model, our ultimate outcome was to spur research in health disparities and to involve the community in that process. So Gelise, you're the one that's really doing the hard work of reaching out to the community members to get them involved in this process. But if we can show that, we can show that that's actually happening, that'll be huge. And we can follow it along the way, see what it leads.
Sounds great. Show and tell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions or an idea about what's going on with, why only mostly women come to these events? Is that who's in this space? Is that who's doing the research? Are men just not interested? Like what's going on?
This is Rebecca Leffing again. I was just about to ask you about that question. And my question was, first is, were those numbers the people who responded to your survey or the people who attended?
Oh,
And then following on from that, you seemed to get more attendance from people who were in administration roles or nursing. And is it a matter of who you were able to get the information to? Who had the time to attend? Who had that flexibility in their schedules? Were there any of those components? And then did you reach out to the men who attended to ask them why they decided to attend?
terrific, just terrific points. Excellent question. Yeah, in terms of who came, I think we were only looking at, well, no, we were looking at actual attendance. People in the room, bodies in the room for the color of care. But remember, that was the very first event. And this has had kind of a snowball effect too. Things have gotten bigger as we go, but we have not seen a really big change in the gendered, attendance. So I think your point about who has the time to attend is important. This was on a Saturday, if I recall, wasn't it? Yeah. Who's working in this space, interested in it, has time to study it, I think that probably more women than men, but I like your idea of reaching out to the men and just saying, hey, what made you want to come to this? But it is early, and like the sessions that are happening this week, I mean, we don't know how many people came that were men and women. The unmeeting it'll be interesting to see if that's any different, because we really just started the ball rolling. And maybe, maybe they looked up the documentary and they saw that it was Oprah Winfrey. I think Oprah's probably got followers that are mostly women. Maybe it's something as simple as that. So.
If I could add one point about the marketing and promotion efforts, that was one of the challenges. So we were relying early on people who received the flyers, sending it we wanted it to go out to the entire institution. And ideally, if it could come from a leader who was saying, you really need to see this, it's great, I saw it too, even better. But what was really nice was when the institution started hosting their own screenings, and we were pretty much just the conduit between them having the film and the picture motion company. That is when I think there was probably more sex or gender diversity in the room, but not completing the survey, we can't confirm that. But that promotion piece, though, it is critical. It definitely is. But then it's like, when you see it, what makes people sign up, men or women?
Going back, I just want to highlight, there's two comments in the chat that came in related to the research to policy. So an option to get research into policy, maybe presentations to legislators, lawmakers, and collaborate with entities that have the same interest, and part of process for research to policy, draft policy analysis, and how it affects a certain bill or need to introduce a bill.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm going back. But I'm going about finding it backwards. I'm sort of looking up this Overton website I mentioned. You put in your publications that your CTSA has supported, and then it tells you, oh, here are the policy documents that have cited that work. So it's sort of backwards the way we go about finding them.
But there is opportunity I would say, in both of our work. I do these ready consultations where I have an hour, and you can spend the hour as an investigator researcher telling me about your research program, a grant that you're trying to apply for, or just talking about DEIA and research and what you might need to know to just kind of start your path towards enlightenment, if you will. And during those conversations, there's opportunities to talk about the translational science benefits model and the toolkit and a lot of these resources that Dr. Pelfrey has mentioned, and to see where there is opportunity, how far of a leap is it? Because for a lot of these researchers, it might not be a far leap. But to your point about drafting a policy analysis, maybe it's working with, in the context of our Case Western Reserve University, the Mandel School for Applied Social Sciences or the law school. So just continuing to think about who's already in different places and spaces with that expertise so that we can act with urgency and accuracy.
Anyone else have questions?
We do have a request in the chat for showing the color of care to their institution.
Yes, you can. And I will put the link to the request form in the chat right now.
It's a terrific documentary. And Gelise arranged it. So at the end of the documentary, there were 3 experts in the room who were kind of our panel. And then Gelise moderated a Q&A with the experts. So it gave everybody a chance to reflect on what they saw and think about it and ask questions to people who really know the answers.
And that's something we'd be happy to do virtually. We facilitated that with a couple of our hospital affiliates. So if there's someone doing research, I'll just use our institution again as an example, in an area that is a priority for your group that's watching the film, they'd be a great expert to do that debrief with after watching the film.
If anyone in the room wants that link, I have a copy to my email. Just see me afterwards and I will shoot you the email that has a link to that.
Once you complete the form, someone from the picture motion team will reach out to you. You'll provide the date and whether you're doing it hybrid, virtual, or in person. But that's the easy part. The more challenging, or I should say, the growth opportunity or just the opportunity is to do something with what you learn from the film and to do something with the people that you're watching the film with in the room if you are in a room together, even if it's virtual.
And let us know if you do so that we can sort of add it to our map of ripples.
Yeah.
A few more minutes for any last questions, last thoughts. Even from those on Zoom, feel free to chat or come off mute.
Yes, a question or a comment kind of. My name is Amanda Emerson, and I was thinking about the ripples idea and then also about your evaluation. And was the evaluation done like a week after, or how long did you have between the first event and the evaluation? Did you say? Sorry.
No, I'm glad you asked that. We kind of started everything at the same time, and we started designing a logic model, but obviously that took a little bit of time. And then we had to design a good survey, and then we had to build it, in REDCap. And so at least for the color of care, there was, for the very initial one, there was a fair amount of time, probably a month or more of time before we sent the survey out. And I know that's not great. You usually want to do it like right after the event if possible. But there've been subsequent viewings of it, and the survey went out, closer to those. So yeah, ideally you want to design your evaluation when you're designing your program or whatever it is, like both of them from the very get-go. And I have a lot of experience with, if you send the survey, sometimes even while the people are still at the event, and like plan it into the event, say, okay, take these 5 minutes and there's a survey sitting in your email box. Like you'll get better response rates, lo and behold. It doesn't always, it's not always possible to do that. So yeah, there was probably a month delay from the very first color of care, but subsequent ones, it was closer to that.
actually thinking in a different direction, just that maybe asking questions about, who have you told about the event? And, who did you teach about what you learned? Which you might capture a few weeks out better than you would right after, and would also give you some data about that ripple idea.
Yeah, I think the ripple came later, like after we started. Well, it came much later for the health professions education students. Like the book discussion went on for how many weeks? 8 weeks. Yeah. And probably 3/4 of the way through the discussion, the teaching team that I was doing that with said, you know, we really need some case studies. And I said, well, wait a second, I'm doing a book discussion. There's one in there. So it was very organic. It just happened. But it worked beautifully. And then I went looking for other case studies that they weren't from the book, but they were local, having to do with health disparity issues in Cleveland, like infant mortality and lead poisoning in children. And we found the cases, and it felt really good to be teaching the students about structures in society and health disparities right there in Cleveland. And they're gonna, you know, they're learning to be doctors, nurses, dentists, whatever, right there in Cleveland. So yeah, but I love your idea of adding a question at the end saying, you know, we asked them how they're being an upstander, which isn't quite the same thing, but maybe specifically saying, who have you told and what else has come from this? I like that. Thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned that question about the upstander, because that, if we had to choose a benefit, that was one of the benefits of the length of time that passed, because I would suspect that if we looked toward the VA and a couple of other institutions that had them in December, closer to when we sent it out, they probably didn't expound upon that answer. Or maybe they said no, like it's only been a week.
Yeah.
Last fall, any other questions, feedback, comments? Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Pelfrey and Ms. Thomas, for your presentation today. We really appreciated it and learned a lot.
Thank you very much for having us. Take care.
Okay.